A hard winter wrapped the city in white as a former Navy SEAL in full working uniform followed an injured German shepherd into the frozen woods. He thought he was saving a stray. He didn't know the dog was leading him back to a crime still unfolding. Every step through the snow pulled him farther from safety and closer to a treehouse hidden high among the pines. Smoke rose, chains rattled, someone was trapped above the ground, waiting for help that never came. Rescuing her would mean crossing a line he could never uncross. Walking away would keep his past buried and his future intact. He chose neither fear nor escape. He chose loyalty. What he didn't know was this: the secret hidden inside that treehouse would tie the dog, the woman, and his own past together in a way none of them could escape. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if stories of loyalty, courage, and second chances move you, please subscribe for more. Winter had settled over the mountain city like a verdict already passed. Snow covered Spokane in hard, luminous layers, pressed flat by days of relentless cold until the streets gleamed like polished bone. The sky was painfully clear, a pale blue stretched tight above the peaks, offering light but no mercy. Every breath burned, every sound carried too far. In this kind of winter, the city didn't feel alive. It endured. Ryan Carter lived on the far edge of town, where the last streetlight flickered and the forest began without apology. His small cabin stood half buried in snowdrifts, its roof rimmed with ice, its windows glowing faintly against the white expanse. Ryan was 35, tall and powerfully built, the kind of man whose body still remembered discipline even when his mind resisted rest. His shoulders were broad, his movements economical, controlled. A thick jaw, shadowed by short, uneven stubble, gave his face a permanently hardened look, but his eyes, steel blue and watchful, carried exhaustion more than anger. He wore his Navy working uniform even here, even alone. The digital camouflage ran uninterrupted across the jacket and pants. No plain panels, no breaks in pattern, wrapping him in the familiar geometry of order. The fabric was scuffed at the elbows, faded slightly at the knees, but clean. Ryan kept it that way. Structure mattered when everything else had collapsed. The storm had begun quietly after dusk, snow falling straight down at first, then slanting as the wind picked up. By nightfall, the world outside his cabin was erased into a single color. Ryan fed another log into the stove and sat back, hands wrapped around a metal mug gone lukewarm. Silence pressed in, thick and heavy, the kind that crept into a man's chest if he let it. He had come here for that silence once. Lately, it felt less like refuge and more like a test. That was when he heard it. A faint sound, almost lost beneath the wind. Scratch, pause, scratch again. Ryan froze. His spine straightened, instincts waking like old dogs straining at a leash. Another scrape followed, weaker this time, accompanied by a low, broken whine that slipped through the doorframe and into the room. He stood slowly, every sense sharpening. Predators didn't scratch like that, neither did the wind. Ryan crossed the room and unlatched the heavy door. The moment he pulled it open, cold air slammed into him, sharp as broken glass. Snow swirled inward, and there, half buried against the step, lay a dog. It was a German shepherd, large even for the breed, its body stretched awkwardly on its side as if it had collapsed mid-step. Thick fur, matted with ice and blood, clung to a frame built for endurance. The coat was dark sable, the back and neck drowned in deep black overlay that faded into rich brown along the ribs, legs, and belly washed in muted tan. There was nothing silver, nothing pale about him, only winter dark color meant for shadow and survival. His chest rose, shallowly. One ear twitched, then fell still. Ryan swore under his breath and dropped to his knees without hesitation. He felt the dog's neck, pulse faint but present, alive, barely. "Easy," Ryan murmured, his voice rough, unused. He slid his arms beneath the dog's weight, surprised by how heavy he was, and hauled him inside. The door slammed shut against the storm, sealing them into warmth and light. The dog groaned softly as Ryan laid him near the stove. Up close, the injuries were worse. A deep gash split the flank, edges dark with frozen blood. Smaller wounds marked the shoulders and legs, too precise to be random. The dog's eyes fluttered open, amber, clear even through pain, and fixed on Ryan's face. There was no panic in that gaze, only a tired, searching focus, as if the animal had been holding on for one last certainty. Ryan swallowed. He had seen that look before, on men pulled from wreckage, on soldiers who refused to die until they knew someone was there. "You made it," Ryan said quietly. He worked with the efficiency drilled into him years ago. He cleaned the wounds, cut away frozen fur, stitched the worst of the gash with steady hands. The dog never snapped, never whimpered. He endured in silence, muscles trembling, but still, trust offered without condition. Ryan wrapped the leg and chest, then sat back, breathing hard, aware only then of the blood drying on his own knuckles. Hours passed. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, something shifted. The dog slept. Ryan dozed in a chair nearby, boots still on, hand resting unconsciously close to the animal's broad shoulder. Near dawn, he woke to movement. The dog was awake, head lifted, watching him. The fire had burned low, embers glowing red in the half-light. Snow reflected pale brightness through the window, turning the room almost blue. Ryan rose and poured water into a bowl, setting it within reach. The dog struggled, then drank slowly. When he finished, he didn't. "Lie back down." He looked at Ryan again, longer this time, as if committing the man to memory. Ryan checked the bandages, cleaning dried blood from the fur. That was when he noticed it. Raw skin beneath the thick hair around the front legs. Circular abrasions, symmetrical, pressure marks, his fingers stilled. These weren't from wire snagged on brush. They weren't animal bites or falls. Ryan knew restraint marks when he saw them. He had seen them on wrists, ankles, necks, in places where mercy had been deliberately withheld. He leaned back, the room suddenly too quiet. "Someone did this to you," he said. The dog's ears flicked. He didn't look away. Outside, the storm eased. The city lay silent beneath its frozen shroud, bright and unforgiving. Inside the cabin, Ryan Carter knelt beside a wounded German shepherd who had crossed a blizzard not to escape something, but to reach someone, and whatever had chased him into the snow hadn't let go easily. Morning broke hard and bright, the kind of winter light that revealed everything and forgave nothing. Snow covered the forest in a flawless white sheet, each pine standing like a silent cathedral pillar, their branches bowed under frozen weight. Sunlight cut through the cold air and reflected off the drifts until the world seemed carved from glass. Ryan Carter stood at the window of his cabin, breath fogging the pain, watching the stillness as if it might move without warning. Behind him, the dog stirred. The German shepherd lifted his head slowly, muscles tensing as if bracing for pain that never quite came. He was large, easily over 90 pounds when healthy, but the injuries had stolen his bulk, leaving powerful lines visible beneath thick fur. The black overlay across his back looked almost painted against the snow-bright room, his dark sable coat absorbing light rather than reflecting it. His amber eyes were alert now, tracking Ryan with quiet intensity. Ryan turned at the chin, soft scrape of claws on wood. He crouched slowly, careful not to crowd the animal. The dog didn't flinch. He watched, evaluating, as if weighing a threat that had already proven itself. "You're still with me," Ryan said, more to himself than the dog. The shepherd's tail moved once, a small, deliberate motion that spoke of restraint rather than joy. His ears stayed forward, angled toward the door, toward the forest beyond the walls. Ryan checked the bandages again, tightening one where the swelling had gone down. The wound edges were clean, too clean. He had seen battlefield injuries, animal attacks, industrial accidents. This wasn't any of those. The cut on the flank was straight, controlled, human-made. The abrasions on the front legs told a worse story. Rope or cable pulled tight, long enough to break skin but not bone. Meant to hurt, meant to control. The dog didn't pull away when Ryan's fingers brushed the marks. He held still, jaw clenched, eyes distant. "Someone tied you up," Ryan said quietly. The dog's chest rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. He didn't whine. He didn't growl. He simply stared past Ryan, toward the window, toward the dark line of trees beyond the snowfield. Ryan straightened and went to the stove, refilling the kettle. He moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, boots thudding softly, uniform crisp even after a sleepless night. The Navy working uniform was more than clothing. It was armor. Continuous digital camouflage covered every inch of the fabric, a reminder of who he had been when the world still made sense in objectives and exits. He set a bowl of warm water and softened food down near the dog. The shepherd sniffed once, then ate carefully, pausing between bites as if listening for something no one else could hear. Ryan watched him, recognition creeping in like cold through a seam. He knew this posture, the hyper-awareness, the way the body never fully relaxed even in safety. He had lived in that state for years, long after the missions ended. "Shadow," Ryan said suddenly, the name forming without effort. "You need a name." The dog paused mid-bite. His ears twitched. "Shadow," Ryan repeated, "because you don't make noise, and because you keep close." The shepherd looked up then, meeting Ryan's gaze fully for the first time. Something passed between them, acceptance maybe, or acknowledgement. His tail moved again, a fraction stronger this time. Shadow. The day stretched on, bright and merciless. Ryan shoveled the path outside, keeping Shadow in sight through the window. The dog followed his movement with his eyes, tracking each step, each pause. When a gust of wind rattled the trees, Shadow's muscles tightened, but he didn't bolt. He stayed where he was, grounding himself against the floor. By afternoon, Ryan noticed the pattern. Shadow positioned himself where he could see the forest at all times. He chose angles that gave him lines of sight, vantage points like a sentry would. He ignored the kitchen, the warmth, the soft blanket Ryan laid out near the stove. His attention belonged to the trees. "What is it?" Ryan asked, stepping beside him. Shadow's low whine vibrated in his chest, barely audible. It wasn't fear. It was urgency. Ryan scanned the tree line. Snow, pines, shadowed undergrowth. Nothing moved. Still, the feeling didn't fade. As evening came on, the light softened but never truly dimmed, reflected endlessly by the snow. Ryan cooked in silence. He caught himself talking, to the dog, to the room, to the memory of order. Shadow listened without judgment, eyes steady, presence heavy and real. That night, Ryan woke to a sound that wasn't wind. Shadow stood at the door. His posture was rigid, tail low, ears forward. One paw lifted and pressed lightly against the wood, as if testing it. He looked back at Ryan, eyes sharp, then tugged at the sleeve of Ryan's jacket with careful teeth. Aggressive, commanding. Ryan sat up, heart pounding. "No," he said instinctively, "not tonight." Shadow didn't release him. He tugged again, harder, then stepped back and faced the door once more. His entire body radiated intent. Ryan swung his legs off the bed and stood. The cabin felt suddenly too small, too thin against whatever waited beyond the trees. He grabbed his jacket, his gaze never leaving the dog. Shadow exhaled, a quiet sound of relief, and waited. Outside, the forest stood frozen in silver light, bright and unforgiving. Somewhere beyond the tree line, something had gone wrong, and Shadow had survived it. Now he wanted Ryan to follow. By midday, winter had stripped the world down to truth. The snow lay smooth and unbroken beneath a sun that offered light without warmth, turning the forest into a vast white map where every step confessed itself. Shadows fell sharp and blue at the base of the pines, and each breath Ryan Carter took burned cleanly in his lungs. This was not the kind of cold that crept or surprised. It announced itself openly, demanding respect. Ryan locked the cabin door behind him and adjusted the straps of the pack across his shoulders. Inside were the essentials only. First aid supplies, thermal wrap, water, a compact ration bar, rope, flashlight, and a small pry tool. Years in uniform had taught him not to argue with instinct once it spoke clearly. He wore his Navy working uniform as always, the continuous digital camouflage unbroken across jacket and trousers, a second skin that reminded him how to move, how to endure. His beard was trimmed short but uneven, dark against weathered skin, his jaw set with the familiar calm that came before action. Shadow waited in the snow a few paces ahead, no leash, no hesitation. The German shepherd stood tall despite his injuries, thick dark sable coat cutting a powerful silhouette against the white. The black overlay along his back and neck looked almost liquid in the sunlight, flowing into deep brown along his sides, his legs and belly dusted tan like old parchment. He was no longer limping. Pain still lived in him, but purpose was louder. Ryan nodded once. "Lead." Shadow moved immediately. He didn't charge or bound the way an untrained dog might. He trotted with economy, paws finding firm ground beneath the powder, body angled into the terrain as if reading contours invisible to human eyes. Ryan followed, stepping deliberately into the shepherd's prints, conserving energy, measuring distance by breath and heartbeat. The forest swallowed them quickly, the cabin shrinking behind the trees until it vanished entirely. They crossed a shallow ravine where snow clung to frozen rock like plaster. Shadow paused at the edge, ears flicking, nose lifting to test the air. Ryan waited without speaking. After a moment, Shadow chose a crossing point and moved on, confident. Ryan felt a familiar tightening in his chest, the recognition of leadership, not dominance, trust. The deeper they went, the more the land shifted. This was not untouched wilderness. Beneath the snow, there were signs. Old cut stumps, faint fence wire half buried in ice, the ghost of a footpath swallowed by years. The forest thinned in places, opening into pockets where light pooled brighter. And through one such clearing, Ryan glimpsed something unexpected, the distant outline of the city. Low buildings, gray and square, crouched beneath the mountains. Roads traced pale lines through the snow. Spokane, or a city like it, sat not far away, close enough that its presence hummed beneath the silence. This wasn't a place meant to be hidden. It was a place meant to be overlooked. Shadow veered north, skirting the city's edge. His pace quickened, urgency tightening his movements. Ryan felt it too now, a pull he couldn't yet name. Then he saw it. At first it looked like a trick of light, an irregular shadow tangled among branches high above the ground. Ryan slowed, squinting through the glare. Shadow stopped and sat, gaze fixed upward. The structure emerged piece by piece as Ryan stepped closer. A treehouse. Not the cheerful kind built for children in summer afternoons, but something older, heavier. It was anchored high between three mature pines, its platform reinforced with dark, weathered beams. The wood had gone gray with age, edges rough, nails rusted. Snow coated the roof in a thick, uneven layer, and from one corner rose a narrow metal pipe. Smoke drifted from it, thin, gray, alive. Ryan's pulse kicked. The treehouse stood perhaps 20 feet off the ground, its ladder replaced by a narrow wooden stairway that wrapped around the trunk of the largest pine. Each step was rimmed with ice, the rail warped but intact. The design was deliberate, defensive even, not something thrown together on a whim. Shadow rose and padded forward, stopping at the base of the stairs. He looked back at Ryan once, eyes bright, then up again. Ryan scanned the area, cataloging details the way training demanded. No fresh vehicle tracks, no voices. The snow around the tree was disturbed only by animal prints and one narrow path compressed by repeated use. Whoever came here did so carefully, quietly. He stepped closer. That was when he saw the chain. It was looped around the lowest stair, thick and rusted, threaded through the railing and cinched tight with a heavy padlock. The metal was old but well-maintained, oiled against the cold. Someone hadn't chained this recently in a panic. This had been planned. Ryan crouched, gloved fingers brushing the chain. It was solid. The lock bore scratches near the keyway, as if someone had tried and failed to open it from this side. Shadow growled low in his throat, a sound that vibrated rather than carried. His body angled forward, muscles coiled, hackles lifting slightly along the black ridge of his spine. This wasn't fear. It was recognition. Easy, Ryan murmured, though his own nerves were singing now. He tilted his head, listening. The forest remained still, but beneath the hush, there it was, the faintest sound, not wind, not creaking wood. A cough, thin and weak, carried down from above, so light Ryan wondered if he'd imagined it. Shadow hadn't. The dog pressed his nose against the first step and whined, sharp and pleading, then pawed at the chain. Once, twice. He looked back at Ryan again, eyes blazing with urgency. Ryan stood, jaw tightening. Smoke, a locked stairway, a sound from above. Every instinct screamed the same conclusion. Someone was up there, someone who couldn't come down. Ryan rested a hand briefly on Shadow's head, fingers sinking into thick fur. The dog leaned into the touch for half a second, grounding himself, then turned back to the stairs. Ryan reached into his pack, fingers closing around the pry tool. He tested the weight of it, already calculating angles, noise, time. He glanced once more at the tree line, the city beyond, the world that would keep moving whether he acted or not. Then he stepped toward the chain. Above them, the smoke continued to rise, fragile and defiant against the bright winter sky. The light never truly softened as afternoon slid toward evening. Winter kept its clarity, turning the snow into a mirror that reflected every motion upward into the trees. Ryan Carter worked quickly at the base of the stairway, breath steady, movements economical. The chain was old but deliberate. Thick links looped through the lowest step and cinched tight with a heavy padlock whose metal had been oiled against corrosion. He set his pry tool, braced, and applied pressure in short, controlled bursts. The lock protested with a dull groan, then surrendered with a sharp snap that echoed farther than he liked. Ryan froze for a count of 3, listening. The forest remained still. Shadow surged forward the instant the chain fell away, claws clicking on ice-coated wood. He stopped only when Ryan lifted a hand. The shepherd's growl rolled low and constant now, vibrating through his chest as if warning the structure itself. Ryan took the stairs 2 at a time, weight balanced, testing each tread before committing. The wood creaked but held. Snow shook loose from the railings and pattered down like grains of salt. At the landing, Ryan found the second barrier. The door was reinforced with a steel hasp, locked from the outside. The keyway scratched as if someone had tried, desperately, to open it from within. Smoke leaked from a seam near the roofline, thin and uneven, a sign of a fire that had been coaxed to last rather than burn hot. Ryan set the tool again, angling it to minimize noise. The hasp bent with a metallic whine. The lock cracked. He caught the door before it could swing, easing it open inch by inch. The interior was dim but not dark. Light filtered through a small, grime-clouded window and reflected off pale walls scarred by age. The space was narrow, barely more than a single room, with a low ceiling and exposed beams. A thin mattress sat against the far wall on a simple wooden frame. A small camp stove crouched near a stack of half-burned kindling. Its flame reduced to glowing embers. The air smelled of damp wood, cold metal, and sickness. Ryan's eyes adjusted. He saw her. She lay on her side, shoulders hunched, breath shallow. She was older, late 60s perhaps, tall even in repose, though her frame had thinned to something fragile. Her hair, once a deep brown judging by the roots, had gone steel gray and tangled into loose ropes around a narrow face. Her skin was pale and dry, stretched tight over high cheekbones, and a sharp jaw that spoke of strength eroded rather than absent. Lines traced her mouth and eyes, not from softness, but from years of endurance. One wrist was cuffed to the bed frame with a short length of chain. The metal had rubbed the skin raw, angry red against white. Shadow broke from Ryan's side with a sound that was half cry, half prayer. He rushed to the bed, nose pushing beneath the woman's limp hand, tongue sweeping across her fingers as if counting them to make sure they were still there. His tail beat once, then stilled. He whined softly, a child's sound trapped in a grown animal's chest. The woman's eyes fluttered. They were a faded hazel, clouded but aware. Her gaze found the dog first, and something like relief loosened her mouth. Her lips moved, soundless. "I've got you," Ryan said, already kneeling. He moved with practiced calm, checking airway, pulse, temperature. Her skin was cold, dangerously so, dehydrated, malnourished, alive. He unlocked the cuff with a quick twist of his tool, careful to support her wrist as the metal fell away. He wrapped his own scarf around the abrasion, then pulled a thermal wrap from his pack and tucked it around her shoulders, sealing warmth close. He poured a capful of water and touched it to her lips. She swallowed reflexively, a weak cough shaking her chest. "It's okay," he told her, voice low and even. "You're safe." Small sips. Shadow pressed his head against her arm and stayed there, eyes never leaving her face. His growl faded to a hum as Ryan worked, replaced by an intense, watchful stillness. Ryan scanned the room again, cataloging what little there was. A single chair, a folding table scarred by knife marks, a lantern with a cracked globe. On the table lay a leather-bound notebook, edges warped by damp, and beside it a thick paper envelope sealed with twine. Both were placed deliberately, not tossed aside. Evidence, then, or leverage. He reached for the notebook. Shadow's head snapped up, the fur along his spine lifted, black ridge bristling. He turned toward the door, ears forward, and growled, deep, unmistakable. Ryan froze mid-motion. Under the bright winter hush outside came the crunch of snow. One step, then another, slow, measured. Ryan closed his fingers around the notebook and slid it into his jacket without opening it, then did the same with the envelope. He eased the door until it was nearly shut, leaving a narrow slit. Through it, he saw movement below, a shadow crossing the treehouse, white at the base of the tree, then stopping. Whoever it was stood still, as if listening, as if deciding. Ryan shifted his weight, positioning himself between the woman and the door. He rested a hand on Shadow's collar, grounding the dog without restraining him. The shepherd's body was a coiled line of muscle now, eyes bright, breath controlled. A soldier's posture mirrored in fur. The footsteps resumed, circling the tree. A gloved hand brushed the trunk, testing. Ryan counted heartbeats, gauging distance and intent. He could retreat, barricade, wait. He could announce himself and risk escalation. Or he could act. The woman stirred again. Her gaze drifted to Ryan's face, searching. He leaned close so she wouldn't have to raise her voice. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked. Her lips moved. A whisper finally came, thin but steady. "Sarah." "Sarah," he repeated. "I'm Ryan. We're going to get you out of here." Her eyes flicked to Shadow, then back to Ryan. A tear cut a clean line through the dust on her cheek. She nodded once. Below, the crunch of snow paused directly beneath the stairway. Shadow growled again, louder this time, a promise rather than a warning. Ryan tightened his grip on the doorframe and glanced at the window, calculating routes, timing, the weight of a frail body against a drop that would be survivable only with care. The smoke from the dying embers curled toward the ceiling, thin and insistent, marking their position like a signal flare. Outside, a voice cleared its throat. Ryan didn't wait for words. Moonlight turned the snow into polished steel. The forest below the treehouse lay open and exposed, every branch edged in silver, every shadow sharp enough to cut. Ryan Carter held position just inside the doorway, his body angled to shield Sarah while keeping a clean line of sight down the stairway. The Navy working uniform he wore absorbed the light in broken geometry, digital camouflage dissolving his outline even as his posture declared readiness. His jaw was tight, beard shadowing a face that had learned to go still before violence found a shape. Shadow stood at his knee, teeth bared but silent, the black ridge along his spine lifted like a drawn blade. The German shepherd's amber eyes tracked movement below with predatory focus. Pain no longer slowed him. Whatever had been done to him had burned away hesitation and left only purpose. A figure stepped into the clearing beneath the treehouse. He was young, late 20s at most, with a narrow build and a restless energy that never quite settled. He wore a dark parka zipped high, hood thrown back to reveal close-cropped hair and a face too smooth for the lines it tried to wear. His jaw lacked definition, chin retreating as if unsure of itself, and a thin mustache clung stubbornly above his lip like an idea that wouldn't let go. He carried a canvas duffel slung over one shoulder, the fabric stained and creased from hard use. He stopped under the stairs and looked up, squinting against the glare of moonlight on snow. "Sarah?" he called, voice sharp with irritation rather than concern. "Don't make this difficult." Ryan felt Sarah's breath hitch against his sleeve. He leaned closer without looking away. "Stay still," he murmured. "I've got you." The man shifted his weight, boot scraping ice. His gaze climbed the stairway, landed on the open door, then froze. Ryan stepped fully into the threshold. His shadow fell long and unmistakable across the snow. The man's eyes flicked to the shepherd at Ryan's side. He recoiled a half step, disbelief draining color from his face. "No," he breathed. "That's not possible." Shadow growled then, not loud, not wild. A deep, steady sound that promised follow-through. The man swallowed. "You," he said to Ryan, anger flaring fast to cover fear. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who found a locked door," Ryan replied, voice even, "and someone who doesn't like chains." The man laughed, too quickly. "You think you know what's going on?" His eyes kept darting to Shadow, measuring distance, escape, odds. "That dog was finished. I made sure of it." The confession hung there, colder than the night. Ryan felt the heat climb behind his ribs, a familiar pressure that training taught him to bank, not burn. "Your name," Ryan said. The man hesitated, then shrugged. "Ethan Miller." He adjusted the duffel, posture settling into something defiant. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns her," Ryan said, nodding toward Sarah, unseen but present, "and it concerns him." Shadow's growl deepened, teeth flashing white against dark fur. Ethan's mouth twisted. "You don't understand," he said, the edge of complaint creeping in. "She's family. This is complicated." "Complicated usually sounds different," Ryan replied. "It usually doesn't involve cuffs." Ethan's gaze slid away. She wouldn't listen. Below them, the forest held its breath. Moonlight painted every lie in high contrast. Ethan took a step back, then another, boots crunching softly. His hand dipped into his parka pocket and came out with a phone. He turned it in his palm, smirk returning as if the object itself were an argument. "You really don't know what you've walked into," he said. He raised the phone and tapped the screen. "I wouldn't be here if this were simple." Ryan's eyes tracked the motion. He shifted his stance, calculating. Shadow leaned. Forward. Muscles coiled. "Don't," Ryan said. Ethan's thumb hovered, then pressed. He lifted the phone to his ear, smiling as if the call were already answered. "Yeah," he said, voice pitched casual. "We've got a problem." Sarah's hand tightened weakly on Ryan's sleeve. Her eyes were open now, focused, despite exhaustion, watching the man below with something like weary recognition. Ethan paced beneath the stairs as he spoke, voice low, words lost to distance. His shoulders loosened with each step, confidence bleeding back in as if borrowed from the voice on the other end. When he ended the call, he looked up again, grin fixed and ugly. "Help's coming," he said. "For me." Ryan didn't argue. He stepped back a pace, drawing the door inward an inch. Shadow mirrored the movement, body blocking the threshold. The shepherd's ears flicked toward the forest perimeter, then back to Ethan, reading a map of threats no human could see. Ethan dropped the duffel to the snow and unzipped it part way. The metallic clink that followed wasn't loud, but it was enough. He glanced at the contents with satisfaction. "We can do this the easy way," he said. "You leave. The dog leaves. This goes back to being none of your business." Ryan felt Sarah sag against the wall, strength leaking away. He crouched long enough to tuck the thermal wrap tighter around her shoulders, then rose again. "No," he said. Ethan's smile faltered. He stared up at Ryan, moonlight carving hollows beneath his eyes. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he snapped. "You don't even know who she is." Ryan thought of the notebook in his jacket, the envelope's weight against his chest. "I know who she isn't," he said. "She isn't a bargaining chip." Ethan's jaw clenched. He kicked the duffel closed and took a step toward the stairway, testing boundaries. Shadow lunged a half step forward, stopping on Ryan's unspoken command, growl rising like an engine spooling. Ethan flinched again, fear cracking through bravado. "Control your dog," he hissed. "He's controlled," Ryan replied. "He's just done listening." The wind shifted, carrying the faintest echo of a distant engine far beyond the trees, too far to be immediate, too close to ignore. Ethan heard it too. His eyes lit. "See," he said, "you're outnumbered." Ryan glanced once at the forest edge, then back at Ethan. "You're counting on a lot," he said. Ethan's phone buzzed. He looked down, read, then laughed softly. "They're close." Shadow's hackles rose higher. He turned his head briefly toward the sound, then back to Ethan, recalibrating. Ryan closed the door another inch, keeping the slit narrow enough to watch without inviting. He lowered his voice to Sarah. "When I say move, you move," he told her. "I'll handle the rest." She nodded, lips pressed thin, courage etched into the lines of her face. Below, Ethan paced, talking to himself now, rehearsing victory. He reached into his pocket again, this time pulling free a set of keys. He let them jangle deliberately, metal chimes ringing against the night. "You can't keep her up there forever," he called. "You can't keep me from my own property." Ryan's eyes hardened. "Property isn't breathing," he said. The forest answered with silence. Snow fell in a light, deceptive drift, softening edges without dulling danger. The moon climbed higher, exposing everything that had been hidden by daylight. Ethan took one last look up at the doorway, measuring the man, the dog, the woman he'd caged. He pocketed the keys and stepped back into the trees, disappearing with the confidence of someone who believed time was on his side. Ryan didn't relax. He waited, listening, counting. Shadow remained locked at the threshold, a dark statue cut from vigilance. From the distance came the sound again, closer now, more than one engine, tires or treads, on snow. Ryan drew a slow breath and tightened his grip on the doorframe. The night wasn't over. It was just choosing its next move. Dawn arrived without warmth. The sky carried a thin blue cast, sharp and clean, as if night had been peeled away rather than replaced. Snow still reflected every trace of light, turning the forest into a frozen amphitheater where nothing could hide for long. Ryan Carter stood inside the treehouse doorway, muscles tight, listening to the world wake up wrong. Below, between the trunks, small points of light flickered, flashlights, at least two of them, weaving through the trees like slow-moving stars. Ethan Miller had not been bluffing. He hadn't come alone. Ryan felt the moment settle into his bones, the familiar click of inevitability. He turned inward, measuring time, distance, weight. Sarah sat slumped against the wall, wrapped in the thermal blanket, her breathing shallow but steady. In the growing light, he could see her more clearly now. She was tall, even seated, her frame narrow and long-limbed, the kind of woman who had once moved with quiet confidence. Her hair, steel gray, and tangled, fell past her shoulders in uneven waves. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in places, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones that gave her face an angular strength despite exhaustion. There was something resolute in her eyes, hazel dulled by fatigue but not extinguished, that suggested she had endured far more than this night. Shadow paced once, then settled at Ryan's side. In the cold blue dawn, the German shepherd looked carved from shadow itself. The dark sable coat absorbed light, the black overlay along his back rising and falling with each controlled breath. His ears pivoted independently, tracking the flashlights below, then the wind, then the faint creak of the stairway. He was alert, focused, ready. The injuries that had nearly killed him seemed distant now, eclipsed by purpose. "We're going," Ryan said quietly, more statement than reassurance. Sarah lifted her head with effort. "They'll come up the stairs," she whispered, voice rough but steady. "They always do." Ryan nodded once. He tightened the straps of his pack and crouched in front of her. "I'll carry you," he said. "When I say move, you don't hesitate." Her mouth curved in something close to a smile. "You sound like him," she murmured, too softly for him to question. The first shout rose from below, muffled by distance and trees. Ethan's voice edged with impatience. Ryan didn't answer. He shifted Sarah's weight carefully, sliding one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her shoulders. She was frighteningly light, as if winter itself had been feeding on her. Shadow moved to the rear of the room, nosing at the wall behind the stove. He pawed once, then again, more urgently. Ryan followed his gaze and saw it, a narrow panel half hidden behind a stack of split wood. Not a door exactly, but a service hatch cut into the wall, likely meant for hauling supplies from the ground when the treehouse was first built. It was low, barely wide, enough for a man to crawl through, and latched from the inside. Ryan shifted Sarah against his chest. "Good boy," he breathed. He crossed the room just as the first boot hit the stairway outside. The wood groaned under unfamiliar weight. Voices followed, 2 men at least, their tones sharp, irritated, confident in numbers. Ethan laughed, the sound thin and ugly as it carried upward. Ryan kicked the latch free with the heel of his boot. Cold air rushed in through the opening, sharp and clean. Snow lay piled beneath the hatch in a drift that softened the drop. He backed toward it, Shadow pressing close, guarding their flank. The shepherd paused only long enough to glance at the stairway, teeth flashing in a silent snarl, before turning back to Ryan. The treehouse shook. Someone slammed against the door, wood rattling in its frame. The lantern on the table wobbled, teetered. Ryan lunged instinctively, but he was half a step too late. The lantern fell. It hit the floor and burst, glass shattering outward in a bright, vicious spray. Oil splashed across the dry boards, and the flame caught instantly. Fire bloomed with a hungry roar, racing along the grain of the wood as if the structure itself had been waiting to burn. Heat surged, smoke rolled low and fast. "Move!" Ryan shouted. Shadow dove through the hatch without hesitation, landing in the snow below and spinning instantly, barking once, sharp, commanding. Ryan followed, dropping to one knee to cushion the descent with Sarah's weight. The snow swallowed the impact, cold biting through fabric. Behind them, fire climbed the walls of the treehouse, orange tongues licking at beams darkened by decades of sap and age. The door burst open above, silhouetting Ethan against the flames. His face glowed red and distorted, eyes wide with rage. "Where are the papers?" he screamed, voice cracking. "You don't leave with them." Ryan didn't answer. He turned and ran. Shadow led, bounding ahead with powerful strides, angling away from the burning tree toward thicker cover. Ryan followed as best he could, legs burning, breath tearing at his chest. Snow sprayed with each step, the cold a counterpoint to the heat roaring behind them. The fire roared louder now, feeding on dry wood, climbing fast. The treehouse became a torch, flames spiraling upward, embers scattering into the dawn sky. Smoke poured between the trees in a dark column, visible for miles. They reached a shallow dip in the terrain where the snow lay deeper and softer. Ryan slowed, lowering Sarah carefully to the ground and shielding her with his body. Shadow circled once, then planted himself at her feet, facing back toward the fire. Ethan stumbled into view beneath the burning tree, coughing, his jacket scorched at the hem. Firelight carved his features into something feral, jaw clenched, eyes blazing. He took a step toward them, then another, fury dragging him forward. "Give them to me!" he shouted again, voice raw. "That's all this is about!" Ryan straightened slowly, positioning himself between Ethan and Sarah. Smoke stung his eyes, the crackle of flames filling the air. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, a sound cut through the chaos, a siren, far off, rising and falling in uncertain rhythm. Ethan heard it too. He hesitated, torn between greed and self-preservation. "You think that's for you?" he spat. "You think you're the good guy here?" Ryan said nothing. He rested a hand on Shadow's collar, feeling the steady power coiled beneath fur and muscle. The shepherd's growl rose again, deeper now, vibrating through the snow. The siren grew louder. Or maybe it was another engine. It was impossible to tell. Ethan backed away slowly, eyes darting between Ryan, the dog, and the approaching sound. "This isn't over," he said, voice shaking with more than anger now. "You don't know what you're holding." He turned and vanished into the trees, swallowed by smoke and shadow. Ryan exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. He dropped to one knee beside Sarah, checking her breathing, her pulse. She was shaking violently now, shock and cold setting in, but her eyes were open. "You saved me," she whispered. Ryan shook his head once. "We're not done yet." The siren, or sirens, continued to approach, their echo bouncing unpredictably through the frozen forest. Shadow lifted his head, ears forward, assessing. Friend or foe remained unclear. Behind them, the treehouse collapsed inward with a thunderous crack, sending a wave of sparks into the pale morning sky. Ryan pulled Sarah closer, bracing for what came next. By noon, the forest looked almost harmless. Sunlight bounced off the snow in blinding sheets, turning the rutted logging road into a white ribbon that cut through the trees. Tire tracks were visible now, fresh, heavy, unmistakable. A dark pickup truck sat idling near the tree line, its engine rumbling low, exhaust fogging the cold air. The violence of the morning felt temporarily paused, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Ryan Carter stood in the open clearing, boots planted wide, the weight of the rifle familiar in his hands. His Navy working uniform stood out sharply against the brightness, the continuous digital camouflage breaking his outline even in full daylight. His face was drawn, beard darkened by smoke and sweat, but his eyes were steady, alert, measuring everything at once. Sarah lay propped against a fallen log, wrapped in layers of insulation in Ryan's spare jacket. In daylight, her fragility was more apparent. She was tall and narrow, bones fine and abundant, elongated, as if she had once been elegant in a quiet, unshowy way. Her skin was pale with a faint gray undertone from prolonged cold, lips cracked, cheeks hollowed. Her gray hair had been brushed back clumsily, revealing a high forehead and eyes that still held sharpness despite exhaustion. She watched everything with the wary patience of someone who had learned that rescue often arrived wearing unfamiliar faces. Shadow lay beside her, body angled protectively, his dark sable coat stark against the snow. The black overlay along his spine looked almost blue in the sunlight, his tan legs dusted white. He was calm now, alert but no longer coiled to strike. His amber eyes tracked movement at the edge of the clearing, following the approaching patrol. Ryan raised the rifle and fired 3 shots into the air, measured, evenly spaced. The sound cracked across the frozen valley, echoing off distant slopes. A survival signal, a promise that someone was alive. Within minutes, the response came. Two vehicles emerged along the logging road, a second pickup and an older utility SUV marked with county insignia. The engines slowed as they entered the clearing. Doors opened cautiously. Men stepped out, 4 of them, spread in a loose arc. The first was a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with a weathered face and graying beard, wearing a heavy sheriff's jacket stretched tight across his chest. His eyes were sharp, practiced, missing nothing. This was Deputy Mark Hale, a man shaped by decades of winter calls and bad outcomes, his posture wary but controlled. Behind him came 2 others, one younger, clean-shaven, nervous energy written in the tightness of his jaw, the other lean and quiet, eyes hooded, hands never far from his belt. They were deputies, but not all deputies carried themselves the same. Ethan Miller was pulled from behind a tree moments later, wrists bound with zip ties, jacket scorched and torn. In daylight, he looked smaller. Thin shoulders, pale face, eyes darting. But the smile was still there, curling his mouth in a way that suggested he believed the story was far from finished. "Afternoon," Ethan said lightly as he was pushed forward. "This all looks worse than it is." Ryan didn't answer. He lowered the rifle only when Deputy Hale nodded once, slow and deliberate. "We'll take it from here," Hale said. His voice was calm, authoritative. "You did the right thing calling it in." Ryan nodded, but didn't move. Shadow remained at Sarah's side, head lifted, ears forward. Sarah shifted weakly, drawing a shallow breath. "The coat," she whispered. Ryan knelt beside her at once. "What coat?" She swallowed, eyes flicking toward the burned remains of the treehouse, then toward a nearby pine. "Wool," she said. "Dark, hanging near the base of the tree. I sewed it inside." Ryan followed her gaze. Near the scorched trunk of the fallen treehouse support, a heavy wool coat hung. From a low branch, edges singed but intact. He rose and crossed to it, every step deliberate. He laid the coat across the hood of the truck. It was old, thick, the kind made to last decades. The lining was worn but carefully mended in places, stitching uneven, done by hand. Ryan slid a knife carefully along the seam near the hem. His fingers brushed paper. He reached inside and pulled free a tightly wrapped bundle, protected by oilcloth and careful folds. Documents. Official, yellowed with age but preserved. Ryan unfolded the top page. His breath left him in a slow, silent rush. The name stared back at him, one he had not spoken aloud in years. A name tied to old photographs, to stories told once and then never again. A man who had shaped Ryan's childhood without ever being fully understood. A person whose absence had left questions that no one wanted to answer. Shadow lifted his head, watching Ryan closely. Sarah saw his face change. "You recognize it?" she said, softly. Ryan nodded once. "I do." The forest felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. This wasn't just evidence. It was history. It was the reason Shadow had survived the snow, the chains, the fire. The dog hadn't just been running for help, he had been leading Ryan toward a truth buried long before either of them arrived in these woods. Ryan turned back toward the deputies. "I need this logged," he said evenly. "Chain of custody, now." Deputy Hale reached out, but before his fingers closed around the papers, the quiet deputy behind him glanced down at the names. His expression changed. It was subtle, a tightening around the eyes, a shift of weight. He took one step back, as if distance itself might erase what he had seen. Ryan noticed. Shadow noticed too. The shepherd's head snapped toward the man, a low rumble beginning deep in his chest. Deputy Hale frowned. "Problem?" The man shook his head quickly. "No," he said, too quickly. "Just didn't expect that." Ryan didn't hand over the documents. He folded them carefully, sliding them back into the oilcloth. "I'll hold on to them until a supervisor arrives," Ryan said. His voice was calm but unyielding. Ethan laughed from beside the truck, the sound sharp and unpleasant. "Told you," he said. "You don't know who's involved." Deputy Hale shot him a warning look, but Ryan felt the truth settle in his gut like ice. Help had arrived, but safety was not guaranteed. Ryan met Shadow's gaze. The dog's amber eyes were steady, unblinking, loyal, certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Winter did not end all at once. It loosened its grip slowly, reluctantly, as if testing whether the world beneath it deserved release. The snow thinned along the forest roads, retreating into gray banks under a sun that finally carried warmth. Light still ruled the days, clear, honest, unhidden, but now it softened edges instead of sharpening them. Spokane breathed again. Ryan Carter stood on the porch of his cabin, watching meltwater trace thin paths through the packed snow. His Navy working uniform caught the sunlight in muted patterns, the continuous digital camouflage no longer blending him into conflict, but into routine. The fabric was worn now, lived in, but he still wore it daily, not because he had to, but because it reminded him who he had been when choices were simple and consequences immediate. His beard was fuller, flecked with ash and winter grime that had become permanent, his face leaner, harder, but his eyes had changed. They no longer scanned for threats first. They rested. Behind him, the truth had finally finished unfolding. The evidence had held. The leather-bound notebook Ryan recovered from the treehouse had proven decisive. Its pages, written in Sarah's steady, deliberate hand, documented months of isolation, coercion, and quiet terror. Names, dates, visits, Ethan Miller's impatience and cruelty laid bare line by line. The land documents sewn into the coat lining completed the picture. Ownership that threatened to upend a quiet web of exploitation that extended further than Ethan ever admitted. He had not acted alone. He had only been the sharpest edge of a much duller, broader blade. When state investigators arrived, the deputy who had stepped back that afternoon did not return. His absence spoke louder than testimony. Within days, warrants followed. Bank records surfaced. Phone logs connected dots that had long relied on silence to survive. Ethan's confidence collapsed under scrutiny. His grin vanished in holding rooms where sunlight did not reach, replaced by a petulant fury that finally turned inward. He talked, not out of remorse, but out of fear. Sarah survived the hospital. Recovery was slow, complicated by prolonged exposure and malnutrition, but she endured with the same quiet stubbornness that had kept her alive in the treehouse. In clean sheets and white rooms, she looked smaller, still tall, still narrow, but fragile in a way that made nurses lower their voices around her. Her gray hair was washed and trimmed, falling neatly to her shoulders, revealing the elegant bones of her face. Her skin regained color gradually, warmth returning to hands that had once been numb for weeks. She spoke little at first, conserving energy, watching the world reassemble with careful eyes. Shadow never left her side. The German shepherd lay beneath the hospital bed whenever rules allowed, dark sable coat gleaming against polished floors. His injuries healed faster than expected, muscle and confidence returning in tandem. The black overlay along his back softened as his hackles lowered permanently for the first time since Ryan had met him. He still watched doors, still tracked footsteps. But the constant tension, the readiness to flee or fight, eased. He slept deeply now, breath slow and even, dreams no longer chased by whimpers. Ryan visited every day. He brought news, not reassurance. He told Sarah the truth as it became clear, piece by piece, about Ethan, about the others, about the land, and finally, about the name on the documents that had frozen him where he stood. She listened without interruption. When he finished, she closed her eyes, a single tear slipping free. "I wondered if anyone would ever come back for it," she said softly. "For him." She told Ryan then about the man from her youth, quiet, principled, steady to the point of stubbornness. A man who believed promises mattered more than convenience. A man who had left for service and returned, changed, carrying ghosts he never learned how to name. A man who loved her without spectacle and lost her without explanation. Ryan recognized him in every word. What had been a question mark in his family's history became a sentence at last, complete, painful, human. When Sarah was discharged, she had nowhere to go. The treehouse was ash, the forest had taken back its silence. The city offered shelters and services, but none felt right. Ryan didn't hesitate. "Come with us," he said simply. The cabin changed with her presence. Ryan built a ramp for the porch steps, sanded edges, fixed what had been neglected for years. Sarah planted herbs near the window where light pooled longest, her long fingers patient with soil. She moved slowly but purposefully, reclaiming space without asking permission. She told stories in the evenings, of laughter before winter, of choices that looked small until they weren't. Ryan listened, learning pieces of himself he had never been taught. Shadow adapted as if he had been waiting for this arrangement all along. He divided his loyalty easily, Head on Sarah's knee during quiet afternoons, body pressed against Ryan's boots at night. He became less a guardian and more a presence, constant and grounding. 4 years old, the vet estimated. Prime age. A survivor, not a relic. The legal process ran its course. Ethan and his collaborators were charged. The land was secured under protection. Its exploitation halted pending review. The documents returned to a lockbox, no longer weapons but proof. Ryan watched the hearings from the back of rooms that smelled of paper and disinfectant, shadow at his heel. He said little. The truth spoke for itself. Spring arrived fully one afternoon without announcement. Ryan sat on the porch, sunlight warm against his shoulders, uniform sleeves rolled just enough to feel it on his skin. Snow retreated into memory, leaving earth damp and ready. Shadow lay at his feet, head resting against Ryan's boot, eyes half closed, in contentment. Sarah watched them from the doorway, a blanket draped loosely over her shoulders. She smiled, not with relief, but with recognition. "You found your way back," she said. Ryan looked down at Shadow, fingers sinking into thick fur. "He did," he replied. In the quiet that followed, the mountains felt closer, not as walls, but as witnesses. Ryan had come to this place to disappear. Instead, he had been found. By a dog who refused to die quietly, by a woman who refused to surrender her past, by a truth that demanded daylight. No oaths were spoken, none were needed. The snow melted, the world moved on, and what remained, loyalty, courage, and the choice to stand, proved stronger than winter ever was. Sometimes, what we call a miracle doesn't arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes it comes quietly, on 4 wounded legs, knocking at the door of a broken heart. In this story, it was not strength that saved lives, but loyalty. Not power, but compassion. And not coincidence, but a path guided by something greater than chance. Many believe that God works only through the extraordinary, yet more often, His hand is seen in the ordinary moments we almost ignore. A choice to stop instead of walk away, a decision to help when fear says don't, a heart that opens when it would be easier to close. Perhaps the miracle was not just that help arrived, but that people listened when it did. In our daily lives, we may not face burning tree houses or frozen forests, but we face quiet battles all the same. Loneliness, loss, doubt, and sometimes God sends answers not in the form we expect, but in the form we need most, through kindness, through loyalty, through unexpected connections that change our direction forever. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet miracles in your own life. Share this story with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what loyalty, faith, or second chances mean to you. And if you believe, say a small prayer with us, that God may protect, guide, and bless everyone watching, wherever they are. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and redemption. May God watch over you, strengthen you in difficult seasons, and lead you, sometimes gently, sometimes unexpectedly, toward the light.